Well, America, another day, another radical jihadist attack. How many of these attacks do we need to suffer through before we start acknowledging the fact that the problem here is Islam? This time it was in New York. An immigrant from Uzbekistan shouted Allahu Akbar before he plowed over people with a rental truck, killing 8 people, injuring 11. There have been 10 terror attacks in Western cities this year alone in the name of Islam. That's one every single month. And every time it happens, we have to pretend like we don't know how we can stop this because, oh, we don't know why all of these lone wolves are popping up all of a sudden. Well, I've got news for you. There are no lone wolves anymore. They are acting on behalf of radical Islam. That itself is the problem, and they don't have to be part of a formal organization with ties to a specific nation or a specific group, because it is the ideology that binds them that is what inspires them to commit these terrible acts of violence. Now, critics are going to call us hypocrites, and even Eric Erickson, who I believe is an honest and decent man, did just that. He said, "Dear GOP, why not wait to politicize the attack by going straight to immigration tough talk? Were a gun involved, you'd ask the Democrats to wait." No, whenever there's a terror attack with a gun, the right still doesn't focus on the weapon, they focus on the ideology, which once again is radical Islamic terrorism. When we have people shouting Allahu Akbar in a war against the West, it's not politicization any more than coming out against a Nazi raid during World War II would be politicization. They're literally saying, hey guys, I'm declaring a war on you in the name of Islam. I'm going to obliterate you from this earth because I despise your country, your way of life, and most of all, I despise you and everything you stand for. It would be nonsense to throw that aside and say, well, we don't know why he's committing the attack. And yet that's exactly what the left tries to do every time there's one of these attacks. The Muslim extremist allies in the media, I used to call them apologists, now I just call them allies. They're doing whatever they can to cover up the fact that the primary force inspiring all of these attacks is a sick and twisted form of Islam. CNN's headline read, "Suspect was yelling God is great in Arabic." Weird, that almost sounds like he's a Christian. Why not just use the words he actually said, CNN, which was Allahu Akbar? Everyone knows what that means. There's no need to translate it into English for your viewers, but more importantly, everyone knows it's what terrorists shout before they commit an attack. But no, CNN doesn't want to imply that this man may have been a Muslim. Oh no, we can't have that. It might stoke the flames of hatred. It might stoke the flames of racism. Why is it that the media doesn't ever want to talk about racism when it comes to Muslims? Every time a white guy gets in a truck, they can't wait to call him a racist. But when we have a Muslim who gets in a truck and then uses it to kill people because they come from Western civilization, we never hear about racism. They actually flip it, and they say that you're the racist. Michelle Malkin talks about that in her new episode, Islamophobia, the hoax crime epidemic, and how they try to flip this and make you into the racist by fabricating a series of fake news attacks on Muslims. Watch.
Professional agitators and apologists recycled the same old myth of anti-Islam backlash in the wake of the jihad attacks in San Bernardino.
Anti-Islam backlash is a myth to scream victimhood in order to basically counter all the stories about homegrown terrorism and American Muslims or refugees that we brought into the country who are trying to commit terrorist attack against our country, who have been either convicted, arrested, charged, or sent into exile.
They want you to think Muslims have a bullseye on their back, but it's just not true. CNN's Joy Reid did that when she suggested it's racist to talk about the Islam problem. She tweeted, "New Yorkers don't have a hysterical fear of Muslims, so no one bother marketing that here." Well, I know plenty of people in New York, including family, and I can tell you that's just not true, Joy. Oh, and I wouldn't call it hysterical. Hysterical are the ones who think Allah told them to rent a truck and run over innocent people in the streets of New York City. That's what I would call hysterical. People who have a healthy concern about radical Islam aren't hysterical, they are smart. Especially when people like you, Joy Reid, want to let these attacks continue by covering up the problem. You and your network are protecting radical Muslims from the shame they deserve because of whatever desire you have to promote a destructive form of political correctness. And I say destructive because it's killing thousands and thousands and thousands of people around the world. There are common sense steps we can take. It won't stop it completely, but we need to use common sense to curb the violence. And one of those steps is to stop letting in people from countries like Uzbekistan with a high concentration of Sharia adherents and a heavy presence of ISIS. Can we start with that and then go from there? The problem is the president has tried and liberal rogue judges keep getting in the way. President Trump tweeted, "I have just ordered Homeland Security to step up our already extreme vetting program." Well, I got news. They need to step it way up. The tiny little pause on 6 countries is not going to cut it. But they can't step it up when every time the president tries to pass something, even as modest as the 6-country immigration moratorium, it gets knocked down by the liberal activists running our court. Fox News had 2 terror experts on to explain what they think could be done to help curb these increasing attacks. And the solution that one of the experts offered, I'll explain after the clip why I believe it's the wrong way to approach this. Watch.
Wherever there's going to be crowds, we have to deploy some type of system. In this case, I think bollards would have been a very fair play had those been in place.
Okay, you can put up all the bollards you want. They'll find a way around it like they always do. When they make us take off our clothes at the airport and give up our liquids, the terrorists stop using planes. When they can't get guns, they'll use a pressure cooker they got from Mama's kitchen, or they'll use a truck. And when they can't use a truck because there are bollards in the way, they'll attack us on foot. No matter what you do, we aren't going to be able to just barricade and ban our way into safety. Their ideology tells them it is their religious duty to destroy us. And if we refuse to admit that, you can put a cop on every corner of every city to make sure no one's committing acts of terror. It will still happen. They'll find a way around it, and in the process, we will lose our freedom. So what is the solution? Well, as we've said before here, politics comes after culture, and I think the other terrorism expert Fox had on, Waleed Forrest, got it right when he explained to Tucker Carlson the bigger problem that needs to be addressed before we even touch policy.
The ideology. Don't touch the ideology, says the mainstream media, academia. Unless we change politically and intellectually, we're not going to get anywhere.
At the end of the day, it is about Islam. And we don't need to let people in this country who have a higher likelihood of being radicalized, but if the people in this country influenced by the elite thought makers refuse to acknowledge that radical Islam is the problem, we aren't going to have a chance of getting any legislation passed to curb it. At the end of the day, we are in a war for the soul of the West. And when you're in a war, it's not politicization to respond to an attack from an enemy, whether rhetorically or militarily. The left and even the right, they are too scared to acknowledge the enemy, and that's the first thing we need to fix if we want to have a remote chance of stopping these attacks.